Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Q4U. I am still waiting. So, as you've seen by the headlines, Denice Gary-Pandol and Luke should both be here tonight. They'll be here shortly, but I figure I don't want to put you guys off sitting there. There she is, right there.
Hi, how are you?
How are you? I'm going to put you on the big screen here. They've seen my
Thank
face
you.
enough.
Okay, Robert, thank you.
So we're live right now. How are you?
Well, I'm working very hard. I just got back from a trip. I was up in the Santa Cruz area talking to the GOP Central Committee about the tremendous need to fix some of the various crises in the state of California. The night before, I was in Lake Arrowhead. And the night before that, I was in, I believe I was in Riverside County. It's been a really extremely hectic week, but there's so many issues that need to be discussed. And I love to have an opportunity to go up and down this state and meet the voters and hear what their concerns are. Can I tell you a little story, something that really touched me? I was traveling up to Siskiyou County. Now, Siskiyou County, for those of you who don't know, our state has 58 beautiful counties, and each county has serious concerns and issues. As a beautiful state, we provide over 400 commodities that help feed the world. We provide over 2/3 of all of the fruit and nuts that are consumed here in California and nationwide. Our great state provides over 1/3 of all the vegetables that are eaten in this state and in the world. And it's incredibly important that your listeners understand that with the increase in regulations with respect to water, that there's growing food shortages in this country. So when I was in Siskiyou County, which borders Oregon, it's far northern California, right?
I love that area up there.
Isn't it beautiful?
Beautiful.
So because Democrats and others passed some legislation back in 1970 called NEPA. So NEPA is the National Environmental Protection Act. And so when that legislation was passed by the House and the Senate, it created bureaucracies. One of those bureaucracies is called FERC. FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And they decided that because the people in Siskiyou County couldn't afford the resources, because you've been to Siskiyou, you said, so it's not a heavily populated area. So their tax base isn't particularly high. So the point is FERC came in. These are people that you and I did not elect. They're not our congressmen, they're not our senators, they're not our president. And they're being paid by the taxpayers of California and the rest of the country to do what? To destroy people's jobs. So FERC said that because of the people in Siskiyou County that couldn't afford to, do some changes and modifications to the 4 dams up there, they were going to destroy them. Now, what does that mean, Robert? That means that every fisherman, the entire fishing industry up in Siskiyou, is destroyed. It means that the farmers who pulled water
from those reservoirs
and the ranchers and the community.
And California is already in a water crisis, right?
No, I want to tell you how we can fix that. We're not in a crisis. The problem is we've got Democrats, and I'm sorry, Democrats, those of you that are independents and Democrats listening, but you have damaged the state and the food supply in our state and in our country and globally. And this is how. So we have these federal agencies around the country destroying dams. So those 4 dams were destroyed. Think of all the women and men whose lives were turned upside down. They suddenly lost their homes if their homes were built in that area, because when you let loose of 4 dams of water, that water runs, all the way down, and everybody's home, everybody's business, everybody's farm, everybody's ranch destroyed. Think of that. Think of what that means to the economy. Think about that, what that means to families. Think about what that means to husbands that are trying to take care of their family, or single mothers that are trying to take care of their children.
Absolutely.
Think about what that means. So bottom line, we've had, that's one story. So then as you talk to farmers here, because I live in Kern County, where I live, we're all about oil and ag. That's where I come from, oil and ag. And so I'm talking to farmers. The California Water Board, another bureaucracy, turned off the water, turned off the spigot. In some cases, 97% of the water in this state was turned off to farmers and ranchers. So what does that mean to you? It means to you that farmers plowed under their crops, cattlemen, other ranchers with livestock had to get rid of their livestock, because if you can't afford to truck in water because the price of diesel fuel is so gosh darn high, and the price of water is so high, what are you going to do?
Yeah, you have to sell them off. You have to sell them off. And the problem with that is I've worked on a ranch and everything else. The problem with that is when you have to sell them off, you don't get to watch the market and see when it's best for you to sell them off. You have to take whatever loss you have.
You can take a big loss.
Yep,
and in other states, they slaughtered their cattle.
Yep.
Food shortages are happening now in our country, and it's a result NEPA. So as your United States Senator in this state of California, but also for the nation, because NEPA is national legislation, that national legislation has to be overturned. Yeah. I want to propose legislation in the United States Senate that will mandate that water infrastructure is restored or built new. And in addition to that again, it's mandated on an annual basis. So I don't care if they're a Democrat or not, like Newsom is in our state. I want legislation passed, and I will work fearlessly to get it done so that we can have water infrastructure. We have to prevent food shortages in our country,
right? Globally.
Now, there's some other things involved. So NEPA, we need to legislate NEPA out of the books, right? So NEPA should not be part of statutory law. So NEPA has to be overturned. So I also want to get legislation that will overturn NEPA and defund these environmental agencies that are creating for you and I a situation where the price of food keeps going up and up and up because they keep regulating water to the point where I was talking to one farmer right out here where I live, and he said to me, Denice, I'm desperate for water for my farm animals. And I dug a well on my property with my money. So he took his money on his property and dug himself a well. And the state of California is taxing him for every drop of water that he pulls out of the well he built at his own expense.
Wow.
Think about what that means to his farm. And his family here in Kern County has been farming for generations. This is what that family knows. They know the farming industry. ranchers that have been doing it for generations. That's what they know. And they want to be on the land, and they want to work the land, and they want to work their ranches, and they feed America.
Right.
This is incredibly, these two pieces of legislation have to get passed. And it's just so incredibly important. And also, in doing research on what I can do to help California, I wanted to say to your audience that, you know, here in our state, we have what's called the Sierra Nevada mountains, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Sierra Nevada fills up with snow every year, and that snow cap melts in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
How many of your listeners know that if we saved think of it, 5% from going into the Pacific Ocean, if we just kept back 5 in off-stream reservoirs, in dams, if we had rainwater capture systems? Did you know in our state it's illegal to have rainwater capture systems? I mean,
Wow.
It's falling freely down from the heavens. Why wouldn't you be able to have a rainwater capture system on your property? Hello?
Right. Because it can't be taxed.
Right. So they want to tax us on it. They want us to pay fees on it. They have to pay those bureaucrats in FERC and the California Water Board and every other California agency. They want to pay them a tax. They want to get taxes off of it.
Absolutely.
If I may interject something. Hi, Denise.
Hi, let me see. What's your name?
Sorry, I'm Luke.
That's Luke, my co-host.
I'm the co-host. Sorry. Usually we start at 8:30, so I forgot the start time. So hi.
Hi,
But anyways, I met my wife in California. I used to work out there in Hollywood as a carpenter. Pretty well versed in California water short. Because I was reading your platform, and she's like, water crisis. I think they're done, right? And I'm like, no, honey. There's still stuff. But so
my water bill every month keeps going up, sir. Every month. It doesn't matter that we had flooding and tremendous rain this winter. It doesn't matter. Yeah. My water bill's going up. So is everybody else's in the state.
Robert's in Oklahoma and I'm in Ohio.
Okay.
And my house, it's kind of rural. We have a USDA approved chicken coop. We grow our own eggs and have our chickens, but I have a well, and we're one of our only friends that have a well, and everything on our house is run off electricity, even the well. And so, like, my wife's trying to push me, how do you get everything off the grid and be independent on our own system? But the sewer, the city, tapped us into the sewer before the previous owner tapped in. Other than that, we were on septic or whatever. Yeah. So I'm like, how are they tracking it? Because they were like, well, you got a substantial leak going, and they came and did us a service.
Charging for the water, a percentage of the water.
They were charging us sewer drain water for a hose that was for the yard. I'm like, how is that? That doesn't go into your drain at all. They're like, well, our meter, it's just that your well pipe at some point somebody plumbed it for the backyard downstream of our meter. All you have to do is swap that out, and they told us to do it. Good. But it was just like, because I'm like, how are you charging us for sewer for something that goes in the yard? But yeah, because I understand. Yeah.
Yes, and the thing is, getting back to the point I was making earlier, we feed you in Oklahoma. We feed you in Ohio. I mean, again, I came from Lake Arrowhead the other day, and today I just drove in from the Santa Cruz area, Watsonville, Santa Cruz, Los Gatos. I just came in from that driving back today. And we're growing food everywhere, guys. And
that's one thing about this. This is a very important. California is important. Every state is very important for this election.
Yes.
People need to understand that everything. This is one of the most important votes that we've ever had. 2024 election coming up is going to be one of the most important, influential times of our generation, possibly.
And you're right. And I would hope that your voters would want Denice Gary-Pandol to get elected, because think of what that's going to mean for their life. So let's pivot to oil. Let's pivot to oil for just a moment. Well, just a minute. I want to say one more thing about water. The Israelis have got something going for them. So I share with you about the Sierra Nevada snowpack. If we just save 5%, we could grow more food, which would make your grocery bill cheaper. Think about all the dairy farms. You guys no doubt have dairy farms. We have dairy farms, but think about that industry. Think about milk, cheese, yogurt, butter. Think about that industry. Think about how we can pull the prices down.
We don't grow avocados or oranges.
What?
And I can't live without avocado or oranges, and you guys do.
Well,
Just
there
like
you
right
go.
out of backyards.
And I passed many of an avocado stand on the way back home. So,
real quick, I had a gentleman I reached out to today, talked to him. He retired in 2021 as a deputy patrol agent in charge of San Diego sector, and he has a question for you. And his question is, he would love to ask if you will demand the border to be secure and stop all fraudulent avenues of parole, asylum, and catch and release that are used by the Biden administration. And if so, how will you accomplish that?
it's simple. We've got to make crime illegal again in California and around the country. And guess what, gentlemen? And I hope your friend is listening today. I don't know. Is this a live link, or are you going to air it later?
This is live.
Okay, great. So let me say to your friend that asked the question, we have already federal law that states, it's called Title 8, Section 1182. So federal legislation that was passed years ago just needs to be enforced. Who is responsible for enforcing federal law? Well, up at the top of that authority structure is the president. And of course, the president is responsible for the Department of Homeland Security and the secretary of the DHS, the secretary of the director of the FBI, and the Attorney General of the United States. So under federal law, the leadership at the top of these agencies, including the president and the vice president, actually is culpable legally for not enforcing Title 8, Section 1182, which states, listen to this. So Title 8, Section 1182 says that for every person that wants to enter the United States, the law says you have to have permission. Number one. Number two, it says that you have to be able to show you have a clean bill of health. Number three, it has to show that you have absolutely no criminal ties. You have no ties to any criminal networks. You have no ties to any Islamic terrorist organizations. You have no ties to any gangs like MS-13, that you have not committed a crime in your country of origin. So if there's any record of any criminal conduct, you cannot be allowed to enter the United States. The fourth thing, one of the really important things too that it states in Title 8, Section 1182, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, go to my website. I've written an entire position paper on the border crisis. Everybody could read it. DeniceGary-Pandol.com. There's no hyphen between my last names. DeniceGary-Pandol.com, and make a contribution. You know, I'm fighting to defeat a Democrat by the name of Adam Schiff. And Adam Schiff is a liar and a felon. And we need to defeat him. And I need you to help me defeat him. Because do you have any idea how much it costs to run a television ad or radio ads or to put billboards up on the side of the road? California is a lot bigger than Oklahoma and Ohio. And I've got to buy yard signs for people up and down this state. That's going to cost $220,000 right there. So I hope your friends and neighbors will get on there, your listeners, and make a contribution. But getting back to the border crisis. So let's finish that discussion. So Title 8, Section 1182 says that if anybody's going to be a ward of the state, what does that mean, a ward of the state? That means if you and I, all of you Americans in Ohio and Oklahoma, if our taxes have to pay for them to be fed, clothed, housed, schooled, and education, or jailed, because if they're in jail, we have to feed them and clothe them and take care of them. We provide all their medical costs.
Right.
And in fact, we provide medical costs for them now. If anybody is sick, if any woman is pregnant, if any child is sick, we take care of it, which is costing us billions of dollars in revenue. So the taxes keep rising in America. As your United States Senator, a couple things here. There's a couple of issues. Number one, I believe, as I said, we need to make crime illegal again in our state and in our country. To do that, that means there has to be law enforcement. So a United States Senator, along with somebody from Congress, can fund like DHS. We can also call for the impeachment and get out of office people like the Secretary of DHS, Mayorkas, who is not enforcing the law. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, who's not enforcing the law. Attorney General Merrick of the Department of Justice, who's not enforcing the law. And the president and Kamala Harris, the vice president. These people are absolutely ignoring federal law. That means that they're committing a felony. So we have to get back to a civilized society where laws are enforced and bring back the American way of life. That, we were a country rooted in the rule of law, and that has to be enforced. I want to tell your listeners a little story, if I could, real quick. So here's something for all of you to know. Back in 1854, we passed some legislation. The Congress of the United States of America, so that's the Senate and the House of Representatives, passed a bill. The bill was called the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And the Kansas-Nebraska Act said that for every free state that entered the Union, a slave state had to enter the Union. How many slaves do we have in America right now? How many slaves do we have around the world right now? 30 million slaves. And the Democrats hated us for that. They went to war against the North because in the end, we chose to create a new party in America. So what party was created in 1854? The Republican Party. The Republican Party became the anti-slavery party. Think of the significance of that today in the 21st century. We had a man that had the guts, had the sheer guts and courage to run on an anti-slavery platform. And he won. He won the national election just barely, but he won.
Yep.
He was murdered. He was murdered for ending slavery in America. That's right. He was murdered for that. But yet, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed into law. I mean, that was a proclamation, but it's the law of the land. It was published in January 1st, 1863. The 13th Amendment ended slavery. The 14th Amendment created equality for all American citizens. And of course, the 15th Amendment provided the vote. In other words, Republicans ended slavery. Who's brought it back in the 21st century? The Democrats, Biden. And every Democrat in Congress that's supporting open borders from Canada into the United States, from Mexico into the United States. People are coming into our country, even in legal ports of entry, but are coming here without saying they're a refugee. And they're not refugees. There are some refugees. People from Ukraine are refugees. There's a genocide going on in Ukraine. But a lot of people are not refugees. There's no war going on in their country. Can I
ask you how you feel about that real quick? The Ukraine debacle.
Let's just finish this.
Oh,
Okay. So,
Go ahead.
so what I want to do, what I'd like to do is basically say to the nation, we don't need immigration reform. We need to enforce the laws on the books today. And I would like to get legislation passed that would make human trafficking not just by the way, it just became a felony in our state just a few weeks ago, or like a week ago. I mean, it wasn't even a felony in our state. It was a misdemeanor. Can you believe that? It's ridiculous. I want human trafficking, in other words, human slavery in the 21st century, to be not only a serious felony nationwide, every state in the union, it needs to be a serious felony crime. I want it punishable by death. If they can prove, if a court of law can prove that a child was killed in the process of being sold into the sex slave trade, because little girls, their bodies don't last long. If they're raped 10 times a day, 7 days a week, and some of them are beaten and starved, if they don't, make the people that are buying them for that moment of the day.
Right.
They die. They die. Little boys die. Little boys are beaten. They're used as sex slaves as well. And in particular in the Middle East, I mean, that's a big deal to buy and sell little boys. And there's a market for them.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Right here in our country. So it needs to be not only a serious felony, but I want it punishable by death. I want the death penalty. So that's my position on open borders. Close the borders. Close them immediately. Not just build a wall. Not just build a wall underground, because Hezbollah, the party of God, that group is backed by Iran. And Iran's been growing its footprint in South America, Central America, Mexico, and here in the United States. And Iran has helped those drug cartels build those tunnels into America. And those tunnels that are coming into places like California are also bringing human beings for sale, weapons, gangs, all kinds of things that are coming in here that are nefarious and involved with crime. So gun running. I mean, we've got to get the tunnels closed down too.
We need to take care of ourselves first. America needs to take care of America.
We have to close our borders. Do you let people in your house that you have no idea who they are or what they're going to do once they get inside?
Absolutely.
Does that make any sense to you? I don't open my door to people I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not.
You lock your doors on your car when you go to the grocery store, but you want to open up the country?
Right. Why would you do that? Because not everybody that's coming into our country wants to just get a job. And oh, by the way, I've taught on the university level, the college level, the high school level. I've had students that have come into the classroom one semester with one name and one, one identity, an identity with a social security number. And the next semester, for whatever reason, they have a new identity and a new social security number. My question to you as gentlemen and to your audience, why? Are they stealing other people's identity? Is there identity theft going on?
See, and I think in the case of that individual where they come back and try to take your class over, I don't think they did a very good job the first time. And they're hoping, just jokes aside. But yeah, identity theft, it shouldn't even be necessary. It shouldn't be a business.
Crime. And people that come here illegally sometimes steal other people's identity.
I was going to ask you, I'm glad you brought it up that you taught. I wanted to ask, what did you do before deciding
what led you to wanting to do this?
Well, gentlemen, I had top secret clearances and I worked. So I've always had to work my whole life. I worked my way through school, right? Worked my way through college and through the university. And when I was in graduate school, I I was invited. I was a good student and I was working and the chair of the School of International Relations. So I was interested in national security issues and concerned about the United States of America and the United States of America, particularly with respect to the Middle East, because I'm older than you two are. I no doubt. And at that particular time, when I was going to graduate school, our nation was learning about the threat of terrorism in America. And you're too young to remember, but we had Marines that were blown up in their barracks in Beirut, Lebanon. And our president at the time was Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
And
I'm
Ronald,
from Lebanon. I remember that one.
you are okay.
Yeah.
So Americans were murdered. Christians were being stopped by terrorists in Lebanon. Lebanese Christians had their cars stopped. People were pulled out of the car, and fathers and mothers and children were murdered for being of the Christian faith by the Palestine Liberation Organization, by Hezbollah. You know, different Palestinian groups lived in Lebanon. By Hezbollah, the Party of God, by other terrorist groups. The state of Israel was under constant missile attack because Iran was sending. I mean, Iran has got Lebanon so full of missiles. There's thousands of missiles in Lebanon that could take out every city in Israel today. I mean, Israel is literally constantly under threat, and the people of that country know that. And so, but anyway, because of the threat of terrorism here in America, because Hezbollah cells are, have been coming to this country, we have them in every state of the union, or nearly every state of the union. And if there's not a Hezbollah cell in your state in Oklahoma or in Ohio, there's certainly other terrorist cells that are in your state. Absolutely. So having top secret clearances, that was something I knew quite a bit about. And of course, working on national security issues and the Middle East, I knew that one of the reasons why Osama bin Laden had attacked our country was because, if you recall, during the Clinton administration, it's always a Democrat, right? It's always a Democrat. During the Clinton administration, you'll recall, maybe you saw the movie Black Hawk Down. Yeah. So we had our fighters in Somalia. And actually, they were there on a humanitarian mission because terrorists were withholding food from the population. There was horrific starvation. And, we were in there to save the day. And that's beautiful. That's wonderful. But when they let the President Clinton, through the Department of Defense, through their chain of command, they let them know that they were being surrounded and that they were outgunned and outmanned. Clinton refused to come to their aid. So what happened was they had to escape under cover of darkness. Those who could. Those who couldn't were murdered and tortured and stripped and dragged through the streets on the back of a motorcycle tied with a rope. Yep. They desecrated the bodies of Americans. Yep. It was horrific. Then Hillary Clinton, during the Obama-Biden administration, was constantly being told by Christopher Stevens in Benghazi, Libya, that Islamic terrorists were attacking the consulate, or were preparing to attack the consulate, that they had attacked the British embassy and the British consulate. They had attacked the International Red Cross, that they were attacking our allies and were threatening to firebomb our facilities in Benghazi. Christopher Stevens and the people around him were begging the State Department, because Christopher Stevens was an ambassador. So his chain of command took him to Hillary Clinton as the ambassador to Libya for the United States of America. He was murdered. Men there, our men, were murdered there. Then Biden gets elected. Now we have another Democrat in the White House. And what does he do? So we had a situation where Osama bin Laden attacked New York, a Pentagon, and wanted to attack the Capitol.
Right.
He said he did that because the United States of America was weak. We haven't won war. We haven't won a war since World War II.
Right.
Because the Department of Defense and the executive branch of government has been literally controlling every little bit of our fighting men and women so that they can't win a war, because it's called rules of engagement, and they tie their hands. So now I understand that Osama bin Laden and everybody in Al-Qaeda, people in, for example, ISIS, the Islamic State, all these terrorist groups look at the United States like we're weak. We don't really care. You know, we have the watches, but they have the time, right?
Right.
And so when Biden pulled out our forces out of Bagram Airport and the United States Embassy, just like Clinton did, under cover of darkness in the middle of the night, literally just turned off the lights and snuck our forces out, snuck the intelligence infrastructure out, snuck out our embassy personnel. The next morning, the Afghan army wakes up and they're waiting to get the call from our intelligence people about where those Al-Qaeda and Taliban targets are so they can go bomb them. And there's nobody there.
Yep.
I mean, we literally left that entire Afghan military exposed to murder and rampage, excuse me. So think about that. And now the girls' schools are all closing. The horrific violence against Americans that were left there that never escaped.
Right.
That never escaped. There are Americans there now, no doubt, that are being tortured. And we all need to pray for them. And
Absolutely.
we all need to pray because the State Department is not doing its job. Who's the Secretary of State? Blinken. He's been by Biden's side all along, and he's familiar with Biden's other nefarious, corrupt practices in terms of doing trade with China. China now has hypersonic missiles pointed at the state of California. China is putting a coal plant online every week in China. They couldn't care less about the environment. They care about their military. And this is why, another reason why water is so important to us is because when they buy farmland here in America, they take a lot of the food that's farmed and they send it back to China, and they're hoarding food in their storehouses.
Do you have any plans on that? Because I know in Oklahoma, there are farms that go up for sale, and they're instantly bought by people overseas. The big thing was a while back, they were selling land for 3 times market value, where farmers and ranchers like us couldn't afford it. But they were selling it to people overseas to come in and make weed farms.
To make what?
Marijuana farms.
Oh, marijuana farms.
Yeah. Do you have any plan for something like that to keep the land by Americans?
Yes, I do. Tom Cotton is in the United States Senate, already has proposed legislation. It says not 1 more inch. I love it. Not 1 more inch. If the people of Oklahoma and Ohio help me get elected, and I need funding, go to DeniceGary-Pandol.com. Help me buy those yard signs, buy those billboards, buy those television commercials. We cannot afford to sell our land to the Chinese Communist government. They can set up intelligence infrastructure. They can use our food, send it back home, or send it to whatever market in the world they want to and make money off of our land and our people in our country. That needs to be for America first, and then we can help feed the world. Sure, I don't have a problem selling food. We sell food around the world. It blesses our country. It blesses our farmers. It blesses our ranchers. It helps them have economic prosperity and growth. But when you're selling the farmland, you're allowing foreigners to come into America and buy up our real estate. You are allowing them to make money, grow food, and build intelligence infrastructure to sabotage and undercut the United States military and make vulnerable the people of our country. And it's so much more than that. So at every university campus, we have Confucius Institutes. We have Russian and Chinese propaganda. We have propaganda from Qatar, from Islamic terror states, or states that support terror like Qatar. They spend millions and millions of dollars on gender dysphoria, talking about and confusing young people in grades K through 12 and at the college and university level. They've brought in things like critical race theory. I mean, their propaganda in the United States is to destroy the United States from within. There's a book. It's on my shelf. It's written by Sun Tzu. It's called The Art of War.
Right.
And The Art of War, written by this Chinese military expert, basically what he does is he talks about how, from the Chinese perspective, they'd rather work to destroy a country from within before they ever attack that country.
Right.
So they have the largest army. They now have the largest navy. They have hypersonic missiles that are being built underground to avoid detection by our satellites. They have now found trillions of cubic feet of what? Gas, natural gas in the South China Sea.
Commodity.
They have found billions of barrels of untapped oil. You know what Denice Gary-Pandol wants to do for you in your state and for us in our state? I want to protect and expand the fossil fuel industry, because your audience needs to know we have the cleanest fossil fuels in the world. When we import oil from Canada, it is filthy dirty. When we bring up oil from Mexico, it's dirty. Do you know where California gets most of its oil from?
Where?
Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Now, let me tell you something. After this show, you look at a map of the Middle East. You look at where Saudi Arabia and Iraq are, and those oil tankers that they fill up with petroleum, right, have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, just like that, could close the Strait of Hormuz.
Yep.
Maybe you're probably too young to remember, but I was in high school when Jimmy Carter was president, and we had horrible, horrible lines at the gas station because we were not energy independent, and the price of gas kept going up and up and up. We just got our price of gas here in California was just increased again on July 1st. We're constantly being taxed on natural gas and gasoline that we're putting in our cars. The price keeps going up because when you have a president that's importing foreign oil, they're going to tax us on it all day long, every day. And they're going to
selling off our reserves.
And sold out. Those are emergency reserves. Those reserves are supposed to be in case of time of war, and we need them. And let me remind you of something I'm sure you learned back in your high school class. World War I was won by the Allies because of the United States.
Yep.
And the British the British said to the world, we won the Great War. The Allies, including the United States, Great Britain, France, right? We won the war because the United States provided 80% of all of our fossil fuel needs to make that happen. If it wasn't for the United States supplying our allies with fossil fuels, they wouldn't have won the war.
Right.
It says they like to say, the British like to say, we rose to victory on a wave of oil. And in World War II, the Nazis ran out of oil. The Nazis and Imperial Japan were running out of fossil fuels. We, America, provided it.
Absolutely.
You asked me a question about Ukraine. Now I'm going to answer it, okay?
Yeah.
You said, what about Ukraine? Well, this is what about Ukraine.
Well, let me clarify my question real quick, because when it first started, and look,
why did it start? Why did it start?
Because Ukraine wanted to.
Well, because Barry was out of office, and the orange man stepped in.
Let me get to the question.
He was shutting it down.
Because
And
Putin, hang on,
got him out.
Stop. Because when this all started, Putin said to the world, he said, if you stop Ukraine from joining NATO, I will not attack. Those were his words in the very beginning. If you stop this, I will not attack. And everybody kept pushing for Ukraine to join NATO. But now they're complaining about a war.
NATO. But
Exactly.
you can't join NATO. Can I tell you why we have a war in Ukraine?
Absolutely.
Okay. Number one, Germany had signed a pipeline deal with Russia. Germany has been buying fossil fuels from Russia. And every time you buy oil and gas from a Middle Eastern country or Russia, you're enriching our adversaries. You're enriching our people that could turn around the next day and literally attack the United States.
Oh, yeah.
So we should have had me in the United States Senate then, but I wasn't running. But anyway, as a United States Senator, I would have been saying, look, we have to be energy independent, and we're going to have to provide Britain and France and Italy and Germany. We're going to have to provide all of our allies the fossil fuels that they need so they stop buying from Russia and from the Middle East. Trump was negotiating a deal. Whether you like him or hate him is not the point. He was telling Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, don't sign any deals with Russia, because if you do, they'll use that oil and gas as leverage over your country, and they will make you vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they did. And Biden should have said, you know what? We're going to take care of all of you. You don't need to buy one drop from Russia or any other country, because we've got your back. And guess what? Russia wouldn't have had the money. You have to have money to start committing genocide and dropping expensive bombs over children's hospitals and schools. I mean, those things you just don't build out of thin air.
Right.
They're tens and thousands and millions of dollars. War is expensive. So if you don't have revenue, and Russia's just nothing but a big gas station, if you don't have revenue by the sale of this tremendous commodity, I mean, it's not just vodka that they sell around the world, it's oil and gas.
Right.
Right? So if we're not enriching Russia, by the way, if we're not enriching China, what does that mean? That means that we're in control. That means that we're influencing our allies in Europe. That means that we're influencing our allies around the globe. That says the United States is still number one. We're energy independent, and we've got your back. Don't you do a deal with any other country that's going to work against democracy and freedom. Putin has been saying for years, long before even Trump got into office, Putin's been saying that he was going to invade Eastern Europe. He wants back. Russia used to be called the
It used to be
Union of
huge.
Soviet Socialist Republics, if you recall, right? Remember?
Yeah,
So
USSR.
USSR, how many republics did they have? 15. 15. Poland, where my people are from, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Eastern Europeans that came to America. Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, people fled the horrific brutality and starvation that was being led by Vladimir Lenin and then later Stalin. People fled for their lives.
Yeah, a lot of people only remember what Hitler did, but they
Oh
don't
my
remember
God.
what Russia did. Was like
The
10
Bolsheviks,
times worse.
the Bolsheviks, the communists disarmed the population, relocated the farmers and the ranchers in that country, starved them to death. They disarmed them, they starved them, they brutalized them. Christians were under attack, Jews were under attack. It was horrific. Whole countries were invaded and destroyed.
Yep.
Ukraine said to the United States, we're not going to go through that again. We were invaded by the Nazis. We were invaded by the communists. We don't want to live under that brutality another day. And they have fought like hell to win it with their own soldiers and their own people. That's important. Putin has always said he wants to take back Ukraine, Moldova, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. I've been to some of those countries. I know what it looks like.
We're almost out of time. I want to give you a last closing statement. Anything you want to say, because this has flown by. It really has. Anything you want to say, please.
Well,
and everybody out there listening, like she has said, if you agree with anything that she has said, and you do believe that this election is important, and you want to stand with her, DeniceGary-Pandol.com. Go there, donate what you can.
Even if it's $10, $10 goes with another $10 with another 50 other $10, and I can buy, a few more yard signs. We need to take back this country for our values, for our Judeo-Christian values. We've got to enforce the law. One of the other things I'd like to say real quick.
Yeah.
I want to get federal legislation passed that will create freedom for all school children so that every parent can afford to not have their tax dollars put into the public schools, but can have their tax dollars in their own education account, so that if they want to send their child to a parochial school, a Catholic, a Protestant, an academic school that's really hard on it, really strict on academics, a charter school. Maybe they just want to have the money to have a homeschool co-op and be able to buy all the curriculum and the books and everything that's needed to have a homeschool co-op. Whatever. The thing that this country needs now is not our precious babies confused about whether they're a boy or a girl or a dog or a cat. We don't want them confused about the fact that we're one people. Our national motto, E pluribus unum. This is Latin for out of many one. We need to come together as America in unity. We need to pull together. We need to support each other. It shouldn't be about your skin color. Critical race theory shouldn't be taught in public schools. We should be teaching children it's about the quality of your character. It's about who you are. It's about your work ethic. It's about what you're contributing to your community. Whoever you are, who cares about your skin color? Right. It's your quality of character that counts. We need to get children out of these failing public schools and out of this really demonic kind of education. We need to be stressing science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM classes. America needs more engineers, more doctors, more scientists. We need people. We need people in the trades. We need more technical schools, vocational schools. We need men and women that have the technical training that can go out and work for that oil company, go out and work for that electrical company that knows how to do welding and plumbing and everything else. We need the trades, trade schools and vocational schools and technical schools. These are important. That's where the money needs to go. So people can afford to go to those schools and get a quality education. I've got people from the Department of Agriculture telling me that they've got to take a class on LGBTQ2, whatever. They've got to take classes. I'm saying, why are you doing that? You know, you want to get the latest instruction on the best techniques for farming, and the Department of Agriculture is making you take a class on critical race theory? They're making you take a class on gender identity? Why is the federal government doing that?
That's ridiculous, because you don't need to know LGBTQ to know that your cows are breeding. You need a bull and you need a heifer, and you got calves.
Hallelujah. Amen to that. You know, let's get back to basics. Hello.
Right? It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful having you on here. If you'll hang out for like 5 more minutes, so we would like to talk to you after this.
Okay. Okay.
Everybody
I'm
out there.
exhausted. You know, I drove. Okay, I'm going to hang out. I'm going to hang out. Just know that
everybody out there, as we always say, be a champion. If not for yourself, do it for somebody else.
Thank you.
And I always say, you know, I'll be me, you be you. That's basically the way to live. We're Q4U. We'll see you guys in the